it would be permissible to carry into a national park. And we're really talking about, think trails, campgrounds, sites, all those things. There's a really important caveat to all of this where even in a national park, even if it would be okay to carry generally in public, that are still going to be off limits. And what is that? We are the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about carrying in national parks. This has come up. It's summertime. People are traveling. It's a commonly asked question. We've had a couple come through the door, so we thought we'd address it. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. So, talking about carrying in national parks, a lot of people, you hear federal whatever, you get scared. A lot of people don't want to carry or aren't confident about carrying in these locations. I'll say the federal government has actually been very proactive on this front.
Well, yes, they have. Now, what I would like to make people aware of is, everybody knows this piece of kind of common knowledge that you're not allowed to carry firearms or weapons on federal property. And so a lot of people misconstrue that as including all pieces of property that the federal government has authority over. Not true. It really only covers federal facilities, which are usually defined as buildings and the property that surrounds the buildings.
Yeah, so this also came up recently because we've seen a lot of post office litigation, specifically out of the state of Florida. We have an interesting quote from a case there. And this is getting kind of hammered down a little bit because the federal government owns giant swaths of land across the United States. The further you go west, the more land it seems like they have taken from the people. So, it's one of those things you want to address, but ultimately it comes down to we have a part of our United States Code of Federal Regulation, came about actually under the Obama administration.
Yes. And you know where the federal government doesn't own giant swaths of land?
Let's hear it.
Texas.
Something to that.
Yes. So now, sure, there's giant military bases. There's lots of post offices. There's lots of federal facilities.
There's lots of Corps of Engineer land.
Lots of Corps of Engineer land.
They got their tentacles all over the place.
But there's only one national park in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And the federal government doesn't have loads and loads of BLM land like they do in most of the West.
So these two provisions, I'll have you go through this, Edwin. But what we're looking at is 16 USC 1A through 7B. This is called the protection of the right of individuals to bear arms, and we have an identical code provision in Title 57. This is the National Park Service and related programs, Section 104-906, identically named section. And this is where, when we talked about Chevron deference or these agencies kind of getting out of step with the United States Congress, these two provisions are identical. So these two things are in lockstep with each other. So we have the law passed by Congress and the regulation. They look the same.
Right. And this covers, so there's different pieces of national land. There's the national parks. There's the National Wildlife Refuge System. There's the national forests. So these rules, there's different rules for each one, but they're all the same rule. So this one in particular that I'm going to read is specifically applicable to the National Wildlife Refuge System. It says protection of the right of individuals to bear arms and units of the National Wildlife Refuge System. The Secretary shall not promulgate or enforce any regulation that prohibits an individual from possessing a firearm, including an assembled or functional firearm, in any unit of the National Wildlife Refuge System if the individual is not otherwise prohibited by law from possessing the firearm. So there we've made reference to who can lawfully have a gun and who cannot lawfully have a gun in 18 USC 922, and the possession of the firearm is in compliance with the laws of the state in which the unit of the National Wildlife Refuge System is located. So this, you are a bit dependent on state laws. So a state, pro-gun state like Texas, that means you can carry all over that park. But then a restrictive area, a restrictive state like Colorado, California, New York, you are going to be more restricted in your possession of firearms. And so when visiting one of these national wildlife refuge areas, national parks, you will have to also continuously reference the state the park is in.
Yeah, so I think the kind of simple napkin math on this would be, hey, am I allowed to generally carry in public in this state? If the answer is yes, whether that be under the authority of a license or permit to carry, or let's say you have permitless or constitutional carry, then it would be permissible to carry into a national park. And we're really talking about, think trails, campgrounds, sites, all those things. There's a really important caveat to all of this where even in a national park, even if it would be okay to carry generally in public, that are still going to be off limits. And what is that?
Yeah, it's the facilities. And so you still, even though we have this great rule, and even though you may live in a pro gun state like Texas, you would still be prohibited from carrying into ranger stations, museums, even restrooms,
Yeah,
gift shops,
potentially, yeah.
restaurants. So just you cannot go into any building that is owned by the federal government that is open to the public.
Yeah, and so what we have, our prohibition on carrying in federal facilities is 18 USC 930. There's a couple of different provisions. It just says generally can't carry into federal facility. If you do, punishable by up to a year in jail. There's a couple of other provisions, like if you enter the place with the intent to commit a crime, or if you commit the act of murder while inside of a facility. So there's some other provisions there. We don't need to go through that. But what is important is what constitutes a federal facility. That definition is in 18 USC 930 G1. It says a building or part thereof owned or leased by the federal government where federal employees are regularly present for the purposes of performing their official duties. Now, that's where the bathroom question comes up a lot from folks that I talk to. Hey, I'm out hiking in the park. Can I carry into a bathroom? You read that definition and you think, all right. And they don't congregate here, or the employees aren't here, and they're not carrying out their official duties, but I'm sure they have a janitor.
Yeah, who cleans the toilets?
Yeah, so the conservative thing there is, hey, be careful.
True. And,
duty. You want to make a duty joke.
Your mileage may vary.
Sure. So, but this is, what also brought this up recently is we do have a case out of the state of Florida. If you want to check it out, it's United States v. Ayala. This is in 711 Federal Supplement 3rd 1333. This happened in the Middle District of Florida, 2024. Case is currently on appeal. That case dealt with a postal worker who was charged with carrying inside the federal facility. Ultimately, the court said, hey, guess what? This general prohibition on federal facilities as applied to this person was unconstitutional. They had to dismiss it. There are some other charges that, are still yet to be addressed. But they do make mention of, hey, look, if we're going to interpret this federal facilities prohibition, all expanding, I'll just read it. It says, the plain language captures everything from the White House to toll booths in national parks to Social Security Administration buildings. And so, they recognize, hey, look, clearly these areas out generally in the national parks, assuming the person can lawfully possess and carry the firearm otherwise. But hey, look, toll booth, this person, that's a person, that's a federal facility. We got an employee there. They're conducting business there. If a person were to carry into that location, some of these toll booths are kind of remote, out in the middle of nowhere, lots of wild animals. And there's some issues when it comes to self-defense with the animals.
Yeah. Like the toll booth in Blazing Saddles.
All right, and I'll keep that mental picture. But I do want to talk about that just for a second because, it's a natural segue. Has the federal government done a very good job of, when it comes to wild animal defense in national parks?
Yeah, this is also a question that comes up a lot. So you're in a national park, you got your gun, you suddenly are beset upon by a federally protected animal. If you kill a federally protected animal, Lord help you, you will feel the full weight and force of the federal government come down upon you. And so let's say that you are in a national park and suddenly you see a Mexican wolf, which is federally protected, a grizzly bear, which is federally protected, but you are carrying your gun. The federal government, in an amazing instance of looking ahead, of foreseeing these sorts of things, explicitly says that you are, in fact, allowed to harm one of these federally protected animals, even with a firearm, if it is done in self-defense. And so you will have to prove that you were not hunting it, that this thing came upon you and you shot it solely in self-defense. But that remedy is available to you.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to see because Texas has done not a great job when it comes to self-defense against animals, especially wild animals. So it's kind of bizarre to see every now and then when the federal government gets something right. But just wanted to cover national parks. We hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. And don't forget to question and comment in the section down below. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.